My sister wrongly accused me and tried to destroy my life, but I turned it around. My life has always been one of small certainties and comfortable routines. I grew up believing that organizing each step would bring peace. I remember the silence in the house seemed to increase with each decision I made. I felt like everything seemed to unfold slowly and inevitably. Sometimes my choices were seen by others as grounds for discussion. There were days when I searched internally for explanations, questioning my decisions. I often struggled to find a balance between compassion and self-preservation. It wasn't uncommon for every small detail to carry enormous weight in family conversations. It was clear that good days alternated with moments of tension that consumed me. I realized that routine was becoming a minefield of unspoken words. It was clear that the sense of responsibility weighed more heavily on me than any external criticism. I remember how I longed for times when everything seemed simpler, and so I gradually learned what truly mattered. I'm Marina. At the time, I was newly married to Renato, had a stable job, and was about to discover I was going to be a mother. I remember the silence in the house seemed to grow with each decision I made. I felt like everything seemed to unfold slowly and inevitably. Sometimes my choices were seen by others as grounds for discussion. There were days when I searched internally for explanations, questioning my decisions. I often struggled to find a balance between compassion and self-preservation. It wasn't uncommon for every small detail to carry enormous weight in family conversations. It was clear that good days alternated with moments of tension that consumed me. I realized that my routine was becoming a minefield of unspoken words. It was clear that the sense of responsibility weighed more heavily on me than any external criticism. I remember how I longed for times when everything seemed simpler. Over time, I began to understand the magnitude of choices and their consequences. I decided to invest my wedding money in buying a simple house, because for me, security mattered more than ostentation. I remember the silence in the house seemed to grow with each decision I made. I felt like everything seemed to unfold slowly and inevitably. Sometimes my choices were seen by others as grounds for discussion. There were days when I searched internally for explanations, questioning my decisions. I often struggled to find a balance between compassion and self-preservation. It wasn't uncommon for every small detail to carry enormous weight in family conversations. It was clear that good days alternated with moments of tension that consumed me. I realized that my routine was becoming a minefield of unspoken words. It was clear that the sense of responsibility weighed more heavily on me than any external criticism. I remember how I longed for times when everything seemed simpler. With each dawn, I sought the strength to continue caring for my family. My sister Paula opted for the opposite, a lavish party that consumed all the funds our parents had set aside for her wedding. I remember the silence in the house seemed to deepen with each decision made. I felt like everything seemed to unfold slowly and inevitably. Sometimes my choices were seen by others as grounds for discussion. There were days when I searched internally for explanations, questioning my decisions. I often struggled to find a balance between compassion and self-preservation. It wasn't uncommon for every small detail to carry enormous weight in family conversations. It was clear that good days alternated with moments of tension that consumed me. I realized that routine was becoming a minefield of unspoken words. It was clear that the sense of responsibility weighed more heavily on me than any external criticism. I remember how I longed for times when everything seemed simpler. All of that shaped me, slowly and profoundly, for what would come next. Over time, Paula's business of handmade bags and shoes began to show signs of instability, and her husband, Eduardo, was no help. I remember the silence in the house seemed to grow with each decision made. I felt like everything seemed to unfold slowly and inevitably. Sometimes my choices were seen by others as grounds for argument. There were days when I searched internally, questioning my decisions. I often struggled to find a balance between compassion and self-preservation. It wasn't uncommon for every small detail to carry enormous weight in family conversations. It was clear that good days alternated with moments of tension that consumed me. I realized that routine was becoming a minefield of unspoken words. It was clear that the sense of responsibility weighed more heavily on me than any external criticism. I remember how I longed for times when everything seemed simpler. I carried that with me as a lesson and a warning for the future. As my pregnancy progressed, I realized that the tension with Paula wasn't diminishing. On the contrary, it intensified. Every piece of news about my life, every achievement, seemed to fuel her envy. I felt a mixture of sadness and guilt. sadness at realizing the growing distance between us, and guilt at not being able to help her see that her choices had consequences. Renato, always by my side, tried to calm me, reminding me that it wasn't my obligation to carry the weight of her problems. But it was difficult to separate the love I had for my sister from the frustration of being constantly attacked. Sometimes hearing indirect comments about my life, my heart would tighten, and I felt like disappearing, shielding myself from the world. The dilemma between keeping the peace and taking a stand became exhausting. I wanted to help her, but I didn't want to lose my own emotional security and the stability I had built so hard. Conversations with my parents became frequent. They noticed the pain I carried and gently tried to guide me without creating more conflict. Each word of support from them was like a small balm, but the weight of my sister's hostility lingered, eroding my confidence and testing my patience. I needed to find strength within myself, because I knew I couldn't continue to be a victim of the situation. It was time to reflect on boundaries, love, and responsibility. The escalation of the conflict became more evident during family gatherings. Paula no longer concealed her frustration, and her accusations against me became more open and harsh. She said I was selfish, that I should give up part of my home or savings, as if my prudence had been unfair. I remember feeling a mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief at that moment. It wasn't just a matter of money, but of respect and recognition of each person's choices. My mother, Helena, tried to mediate, reminding me that every decision has consequences, and that there was no injustice in planning carefully. My father, Ottavio, more pragmatic, tried to protect my emotional balance, realizing I was suffering from unnecessary pressure. I felt cornered, caught between the desire to maintain family harmony and the need to defend myself. At night, when I closed my eyes, I relived the moments of hostility, my heart heavy. The feeling of injustice kept me from resting, and the internal conflict grew increasingly intense. I realized I needed to make firm decisions, as Paula's behavior threatened not only our relationship, but also my well-being, marriage, and the baby's arrival. The challenge of balancing compassion and self-protection became my greatest emotional test yet. I began to realize that any attempt at direct dialogue with Paula devolved into accusations and endless arguments. She interpreted my advice as attacks, and every word I said was distorted to sustain the resentment she felt. I felt for the first time profound loneliness, even though I was surrounded by people who loved me. The feeling of carrying a burden that wasn't mine intensified. Renato tried to be the voice of reason, reminding me that my role wasn't to fix her life, but to preserve my peace and our family. However, listening and accepting this was easier said than done. The nights were long, and my thoughts were jumbled. Worry about the baby, financial stability, everyone's emotional health, and the possibility of losing my sister forever. Every time Paula turned to me with accusations, I felt my world rock, and the need to find a point of emotional balance became urgent. It was then that I began to seriously reflect on boundaries and self-preservation, understanding that love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself to sustain other people's hostility. This realization became the first real step towards my overcoming. The turning point came during a family dinner. Paula, with tears in her eyes and a trembling voice, accused me of selfishness, of prioritizing my life over hers. The most painful thing was when she suggested I should give up part of my house, as if justice were in her hands. I felt my heart tighten, a mixture of indignation and sadness, as if each word she spoke pierced the trust I had in both of us. Renato held my hand, conveying strength, and my parents, though uncomfortable, remained neutral. At that moment, I realized I couldn't just tolerate it. I needed to take a stand. I was alone with my thoughts after dinner, reflecting on my choices, my love for my family, and the need to protect my space and my peace. It was painful to realize that sometimes loving someone means setting boundaries and making decisions that may hurt, but are essential for maintaining emotional health. For the first time, I understood that overcoming this wouldn't just be about resisting the accusations, but about stating my position clearly and firmly. That day, as I lay in bed, I felt a mixture of fear and determination. I needed courage to face not only my sister, but also my own feelings of guilt and doubt. That conflict was going beyond words. It was affecting my physical, emotional, and even spiritual well-being. My body felt tired, my heart heavy, but something inside me began to awaken, the certainty that I could no longer remain a passive victim. Renato was my safe haven, reminding me that our love and the safety of our family were more important than temporary crises. I began to organize my thoughts, mentally writing down strategies for dealing with Paula, firmly but fairly, without losing my composure or empathy. I understood that overcoming this would require emotional discipline, patience, and the courage to face difficult conversations. The process would be slow, painful, but necessary. For the first time, I felt I could turn the page and, while maintaining love and respect for my sister, begin to establish clear boundaries. This insight was the first light at the end of the tunnel and brought the feeling that, even in the midst of emotional chaos, it was possible to regain control of my life and protect what mattered most: my peace, my marriage, and the arrival of my son. In the following days, I began to reflect deeply on my relationship with Paula. I understood that simply reacting to the attacks wasn't enough. It was necessary to create clear boundaries and act with emotional strength. I felt guilty, as if I could somehow have avoided her resentment, but I also realized that I couldn't shoulder responsibilities that weren't mine. Every step needed to be considered: how to talk, when to walk away, and how to preserve my mental health without sacrificing my family bond. Renato was always by my side, helping me organize strategies, bringing clarity when my mind wandered to guilt or fear. I realized that overcoming things began not with grand gestures, but with small daily choices: responding calmly, not giving in to pressure, protecting my space. Each time I resisted the temptation to give in, even while feeling the weight of guilt, I felt stronger. Emotional maturity began to take hold. I learned that true love doesn't exist without limits, and that protecting one's emotional life isn't selfish. Every decision, no matter how small, became a step toward rebuilding inner peace. I began to realize that my strength lay not only in my material achievements, but in my ability to remain whole amidst emotional chaos. This insight became the foundation of my entire process of overcoming obstacles. Conversations with my parents became essential. Helena, with her experience as a lawyer, always presented the facts clearly, teaching me that every choice has consequences and that financial and emotional responsibility are inseparable. Ottavio, more pragmatic, reinforced the need for me not to give in to my sister's pressure. I learned to listen without internalizing accusations and to reflect on what could truly be changed. It was a period of intense introspection. I questioned my patience, my ability to love without sacrificing myself, and the difficulty of balancing compassion with protection. Each conversation helped me realize that love doesn't mean always giving in. It also means realistically protecting and caring for those you love. Renato became an even closer partner, offering advice, communication strategies, and emotional support. I began mentally documenting each episode, analyzing behavioral patterns, and realizing that it wasn't a lack of love on Paula's part, but pride, fear, and an inability to take responsibility. One of the most challenging steps was confronting my sister directly. I chose a time when we were alone and expressed my feelings without accusations. I talked about my experience, my fear of losing our bond, but also the need for respect and boundaries. It was painful to hear her anger and frustration, but at the same time liberating to put everything I felt into words. For the first time, I realized I didn't need to carry the weight of her failures or give in to emotional manipulation. The clarity I felt in that moment was intense. I understood that setting boundaries didn't mean distancing myself or abandoning her, but protecting my own emotional life and that of my family. This conversation didn't solve all the problems, but it marked the beginning of a new dynamic. Paula, though still resistant, began to realize that my decisions weren't attacks, but conscious choices. I felt more secure, more capable of standing my ground and protecting my baby. Over the following months, the tension gradually eased. Paula continued to face financial difficulties, but her demands and accusations lessened. I maintained my stance, firm, but not aggressive. I began to realize that my own peace didn't depend on her immediate change, but on my ability to handle the situation maturely and with poise. Renato and I worked together, strengthening our family's stability and preparing for the baby's arrival. When the baby was born, I felt a mixture of joy, relief, and pride. Motherhood brought even greater clarity about my priorities and strengthened my resolve to maintain firm boundaries with Paula. I knew I couldn't control her choices, but I could control my reactions and protect my family. The painful experience of dealing with her hostility had transformed me, more confident, more resilient, and more aware of what it means to care for oneself without losing the capacity to love. Every small gesture of care for my son, every moment of affection with Renato, reinforced that overcoming problems isn't about ignoring problems, but about facing them with courage, boundaries, and empathy. I learned that true growth comes from pain, reflection, and conscious action. My relationship with Paula still required attention, but I no longer felt fear or unnecessary guilt. After my baby was born, I realized my life had changed profoundly. Motherhood brought not only responsibilities, but also a strength I didn't know existed within me. Every challenge, from sleepless nights to worries about my son's health, reinforced my ability to withstand the emotional pressure coming from Paula. With Renato by my side, I felt like we were an unbeatable team, capable of facing any adversity. I began to realize that my relationship with my sister didn't need to dictate my well-being. I could maintain empathy without sacrificing myself. This insight allowed me to build a balanced routine, protecting my family and strengthening my role as a mother and wife. I learned that true love involves clear boundaries, and that protecting what's yours doesn't mean ceasing to love. In the following months, my relationship with Paula began to stabilize, albeit delicately. She continued to struggle financially, but her demands lessened. I maintained my stance, firm but not aggressive, learning that consistency is more effective than emotional outbursts. Renato and I prioritized dialogue and mutual support, reinforcing a safe environment for the baby. Every small gesture of empathy toward my sister was balanced with the protection of my own peace. I began to realize that overcoming adversity isn't a one-time event, but a daily process. Awareness of my limits allowed me to handle criticism and accusations without becoming shaken. I realized that, to maintain healthy family relationships, it's necessary to accept that not everyone matures at the same pace. A defining moment was when I realized I no longer felt guilty about setting clear boundaries with Paula. Before, any self-defense decision was accompanied by remorse. Now I could act without letting it consume me. This transformation was the result of much reflection, conversations with Renato, and constant support from my parents, who helped me understand that protecting yourself from toxic behavior isn't selfish. I began to understand that love doesn't mean giving up your emotional or financial stability. With each difficult conversation, I learned more about myself, my values, and the importance of preserving my family. I felt that, despite the difficulties, my life became lighter. The feeling of emotional autonomy brought confidence and clarity to deal with any challenge. Over time, I noticed that my sister began to see my decisions from a different perspective. Although still proud and sometimes resistant, Paula showed signs of reflection. I learned not to expect immediate recognition, understanding that each person matures at their own pace. My firm, but empathetic stance began to reduce confrontations and create space for constructive dialogue. I felt more secure, able to assert my position without fear of hurting others, and this confidence was reflected in all areas of my life: marriage, motherhood, and family relationships. Overcoming emotional challenges allowed me to cultivate inner peace even in the face of external conflicts. I began to realize that my happiness didn't depend on Paula's immediate change, but on my ability to act with awareness and respect. The most transformative moment of this phase was realizing that my life had gained new meaning. Motherhood, marriage, and owning a home were elements that gave me security, but true strength came from within. Facing Paula, dealing with her hostility, and learning to set clear boundaries taught me resilience, empathy, and courage. I learned that every challenge, no matter how painful, can be transformed into an opportunity for growth. With Renato, we built a solid partnership based on dialogue, respect, and mutual support, which served as the foundation for our family. I began to view conflicts as valuable lessons, realizing that overcoming problems isn't about eliminating them, but about learning to manage them healthily. Each tense moment became an opportunity to reaffirm my inner strength and my ability to protect what's essential. Looking back, I see that the pain caused by family conflict was actually a catalyst for my transformation. The experience taught me that life offers lessons disguised as obstacles and that it's possible to emerge from them stronger, more aware, and more centered. Overcoming emotions has allowed me to live with peace, love, and security, creating a healthy environment for myself, my husband, and our son. As the months passed, I began to realize that my life had become lighter, even if not all the family problems had disappeared. Paula still faced difficulties, but my firm and balanced stance changed the dynamic between us. I learned that overcoming doesn't mean erasing the past or expecting others to change. It means choosing to act wisely, protecting your space, and preserving your peace. Every gesture of care for my son, every conscious decision in my marriage, and every boundary I established with my sister reinforced my confidence. I felt stronger, able to handle criticism and accusations without being emotionally shaken. Motherhood, which had previously seemed like an isolated challenge, also became a catalyst for my inner strength. Each day was an opportunity to reaffirm my values and show myself and my family that it was possible to maintain integrity, love, and steadfastness simultaneously. My relationship with Paula remained delicate, but now there was room for reflection and dialogue. I realized I no longer needed to carry guilt for her choices or try to fix her life. The peace I built within myself allowed me to maintain empathy without losing myself. Renato and I continued to strengthen our family, caring for the baby and cultivating moments of joy, security, and love. Each internal victory reminded me that overcoming adversity is an ongoing process, built on conscious and consistent choices. I began to value each gesture of emotional independence, recognizing my ability to face family conflicts without losing my balance. The most profound lesson was understanding that boundaries don't distance, they protect, and that loving someone doesn't mean giving up on yourself. Emotional maturity grew stronger every day, and the constant fear of damaging my relationship with my sister gave way to confidence in my own posture. I understood that true overcoming isn't the absence of problems, but the ability to face them with courage, empathy, and balance. I also learned that family conflicts, however painful, can be sources of learning. Facing Paula's hostility taught me the importance of setting clear boundaries, maintaining integrity, and acting firmly, without losing my humanity. Each episode of frustration and accusation was an opportunity for self-discovery and emotional strengthening. I understood that true growth comes from a balance between empathy and self-protection. Renato was essential in this process, offering support, perspective, and security. With him, I learned that sharing challenges strengthens relationships and provides clarity about our priorities. Motherhood became an instrument of self-transformation. Every act of care, every attention, and every decision were also opportunities to reaffirm my autonomy and strength. The painful experience with Paula left its mark, but it also taught profound lessons about love, boundaries, responsibility, and resilience. Today, I share my story with you to show that it is possible to face family conflicts, protect your peace, and still maintain love and empathy. I learned that clear boundaries don't distance, they preserve, and that love doesn't mean giving up your own emotional integrity. Overcoming problems isn't about eliminating them, but about dealing with them consciously and in a balanced way. My relationship with Paula wasn't perfect, but my firm and empathetic stance brought balance and mutual respect. Renato and I continue to build our family with love, dialogue, and partnership, and each achievement is celebrated with awareness and gratitude. The process of facing unfair accusations, envy, and hostility strengthened me, showing that true overcoming is built with courage, reflection, and perseverance. Today, I can say that I am more resilient, confident, and capable of protecting my happiness without sacrificing love for others. This experience taught me the importance of caring for one's own peace, valuing boundaries, and recognizing that personal growth emerges from adversity. Life continues to be full of challenges, but now I know I can face them without losing my essence, my balance, and my ability to genuinely love. Each step of the journey has taught me that even amidst pain, it's possible to build a full, secure, and happy life.